Welcome to the Fit Chicks and Hormones podcast, where we focus on all things midlife, hormones, and how to finally feel good in your body again. I'm Angie, a fellow midlife survivor, here to help you stop guessing and finally get results with hormone smart habits that actually work. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fit Chicks and Hormones podcast. I have a special guest with us today, Elizabeth Katzman, and I'm super excited to dive into all things hormones with her today because I find that it's really fun to learn from other people, hear their experiences, and just kind of get a different feel about what they've been through and then how they're making their body feel better. So welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's nice to see you.
Yes, I'm so excited about this. So let's get started by just sharing. I want them to get to know more about you, like who you are, what you're doing, like what brought you to where you are helping and wanting to help women through these menopausal years.
So long story short, I started my career as a lawyer. And then when I started having children and they had some health issues, I wasn't getting the answers that I really needed. So I went back to school for nutrition and started figuring out, the relationship between gut and liver function and overall health, and started working as a health coach then with other moms. And then all of my clients sort of aged along with me, and we all found ourselves in perimenopause with not a lot of information. And so it was a crash course for me of, probably 2 or 3 years of really intense research and symposium and conferences and all of the things, because there's really not a great centralized educational place to learn it all. And there's a lot of conflicting information, even among the functional experts. So it can make it all very tricky waters. But I love doing it. And as we were saying right before we started recording, every woman is very different. So even if you are well educated and learn all the things, it could all go out the window when it comes to you, particularly as an individual. And that can be frustrating.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's the thing too, is teaching women to listen to their body and what's going on with you instead of looking on, on Instagram to figure out what's going on with that person. You may not be experiencing the same kind of things.
Yeah, and I think it requires a level of attention that a lot of women can find to be quite annoying. I'm not an advocate over obsessing over calories and macros and all of the numbers. At the same time, during perimenopause, menopause, it is a really good idea to monitor a bit for periods of time to really get to know your body, to understand how you respond to food, supplements, hormones, sleep, all the things. So depending on the personality type, it can be either someone could dive in and love that or really not like it.
Maybe feel a little overwhelmed with everything.
Yes.
Yes. I don't know about you, but I find that a lot of women that are reaching out or that I'm coming in contact with or having conversations, they're feeling it. They're like, something's changing. I don't know what it is, but I'm trying to do all the right things, right? I'm working out, I'm eating clean, I've cleaned up my nutrition, I'm trying to, get better sleep, but things just aren't changing. Nothing's changing. I feel like I'm just going backwards. So can you maybe walk us through how that experience was for you when you were in perimenopause, that you kind of just figured things are just not right. So what can I do instead?
Yes, it was tricky for me because when I started noticing changes, it was 2020. And so my cycles went from 28 days to 25. And that was really the first sort of symptom. But I thought maybe it was virus related because a lot of menstrual cycles were changing at the time. So it was sort of a confounding situation. And I really, for the most part, ignored it and just figured that must be the situation. I have some lingering stuff going on. But looking back, no, I was 45 and I definitely feel like that was the beginning of, I would say early to mid peri for me. I'll be turning 51 in a couple weeks. And so I've gone through a tremendous amount since then. The anxiety then started creeping up, and that was discouraging because I was at a point in my life where I had really done a lot of work with my nervous system and, with healing from mold illness and other things that can trigger anxiety. And I felt that I don't eat gluten and like a lot of common triggers. And I felt like I was at a point in my life where why should I be feeling this way? It just makes no sense. And so that's really when I dove into becoming an expert in the field for myself and for my clients, because these little things creep up, and before you know it, you are very off, very much not the way you were. You get fatigued and have a hard time sleeping, and you're doing all of the things. And I think what a lot of women need to understand is to give themselves grace and understand that there's nothing that you can do when you are losing your estrogen and progesterone that's going to compensate for it without, at some point, if you feel like you want to think about HRT, because when we lose estrogen, we are losing mitochondrial function. And, all our health issues really boil down to mitochondrial function, our ability to make energy, to deal with stressors of every kind. And so when we lose that, you're not getting the benefits from your workouts. You don't even have the energy to work out. You don't have the ability to metabolize the food that you're eating, to put it into the muscle. So it can be really frustrating, especially when a woman goes to a more traditional doctor who has been trained that hormones cause cancer and it's very fear-based. They're going to be turned away, and a lot of times they just hear, well, you need to work out more and eat less. And it's just more willpower, or it's more meditation, or it's more, and it's like, no, you still need to do all those things. You still not eat less, but you still need to exercise and fuel your body and work on your nervous system. But you can do all that. If you don't have estrogen, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right. Yep. I'm going to go back a little bit to your story because mine's so similar I experienced mold, living in a moldy house, and then all my hormones went crazy. Didn't even realize, I just felt horrible and all the things were happening. Started, HRT then. What I didn't realize is I probably should have stayed on it, but I did that to help support my body where it was at, right at that time, and then went off. And then I went postmenopausal, and then I'm like, okay, why do I feel just tanked now? Well, it makes sense, right? So I've been on HRT for a while now, went through all that, healed my body, did all the things, but then menopause hits, right? And then you just kind of go boom. I can't imagine now not being on it, but I wish I would have at that time been educated enough to know, you know what? Let's continue to test your hormones. Maybe you need to stay on these continuously instead of going off of them, have my body go a little bit all crazy through menopause, and then now being, oh, okay, I feel supported. I feel like I can do all the things, right?
Yes. And I think actually having gone through mold illness can be a benefit because it's very similar to menopause. It steals your mitochondrial function, it steals your progesterone, it messes up your thyroid. It's so similar in process. So when you then go through menopause later, you're like, oh, this feels a lot like molds, It's because it does have very similar like mechanistic effects on the body.
And I remember that like the anxiety part of it, for even coming out of it, feeling that anxiousness of every time I would come in contact with mold, or like if I was going to eat gluten, if I was going to do something off my plan, I was so just, I felt the anxiety of like my body, I'm going to go back to that place. It was
Yes.
so scary. Oh,
Yes.
it gives right now still, I get
Uh-huh.
emotional about it because it was such a hard place and people thought I was nuts. And
Yes.
but so now again, it's relatable, like you said, to perimenopause when your hormones are just all over the place and going crazy. And um, that's
Yeah. And
go ahead.
sorry. Okay. Yes, and that's why I'm so passionate about informing women younger
Mhm.
rather than make them suffer through that whole period. It could be 10 years, a woman could start
Right.
feeling this way in her late 30s and suffer for a full-on 10 years and be dismissed, and you're
Right.
too young, and that's just getting older, and it's really sad. It's not something we should be thinking about when we're 60, although it's not too late when you're 60, you can still go back and help yourself. But yeah, it's really important for women to be aware and understand and be aware of even their cycles and what their cycles mean, just the basic understandings of our menstrual cycle. And then when it comes to, if you decide to take a HRT, I'm not sure how you take it, but I know a lot of women will do progesterone every night, and that can
Mhm.
be problematic without the understanding of we do produce a little progesterone from our adrenals, but largely it's in the luteal phase after we ovulate for those last 2 weeks.
Right.
And there's a reason for that, right? Because we want
Right.
to upregulate progesterone receptors and estrogen receptors. And there's a real yin and yang, and there's a real level of respect that we need to have for our natural cycle. And, that even, a lot of us have teenage girls or women in their 20s now that are our daughters who don't understand the value of their own natural menstrual cycle and why, although having something like the birth control pill is valuable, and I'm grateful that it's available. Also, there are alternatives for natural contraception stuff that allow us to respect our body's natural production of estrogen and progesterone for our bones and our brains and anxiety and mood and all of that. I just feel like our menstrual cycle is very under-discussed and undervalued in this society.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I didn't get into all this hormone stuff and everything till I was, right into heading into menopause. So I hadn't had a cycle. So I wish I would have known. Like, again, there's so much that's why I want to educate women now and teach them, because like if I had known so much before I just stopped having a cycle, I would have paid more attention. I would have listened to my body. I would have known the signs, and and I feel like it's so nobody ever taught us. Nobody ever said you should be tracking your cycle. You should pay attention to what's happening every month. You should make sure it's normal. You should make sure you're getting it. Like, nobody teaches us these things. And then we're so busy and doing all the things, we just kind of let it go. Oh, that's, I'll just pay attention next month, or, oh, it's a little bit different. But again, it goes back to the education part of it. Like, if you learn your body earlier in life, it's going to help you so much better later in life, right? Because then again, you're more body aware.
Yes, and there's just so much anxiety with these young women these days, and so much of it is just they don't have enough progesterone. They're not having regular cycles. They're not ovulating. They're so young for this, but this is the world that we're living in, and a lot of young women can benefit from just the second half of their month, a little progesterone. A lot of them need it while they're working on the other things, cleaning up their gut and liver and everything else. But it's just ignored because you're young. Oh, you're young. Your hormones should be great, but life's not like that anymore.
Yeah. And women are going into perimenopause so much earlier, not knowing or skipping, periods for a year, just thinking, oh, good, I don't have one. That's okay. No, it's not okay.
Well, and a lot of women in perimenopause are, they have IUDs or they're on birth control. So they really don't know if they're in perimenopause, fully menopausal, late menopausal. So there's a huge disconnect and oftentimes a desire to be disconnected because it can be overwhelming to think about. And it can be nice to just put it on autopilot and not think about it. But the reality is we have to, because it does catch up to us. Our rates of having better health outcomes than men it's better all of our life until we hit about 50, and then it's worse.
Right. Yep.
And why? Well, because we lose our hormones.
Right. Yeah. So if you had advice for, let's say, somebody in their early 30s, mid 30s, and they're on birth control, like, what things would you advise them around, like, paying attention to? Because they don't know, they know that their cycle may be coming and going, but they don't understand what may be happening. Or if they're in perimenopause, what things should they be looking for?
Well, someone who's young, let's say in their 20s, and they're on the pill, I would say, first of all, think about if you're on that for contraception or not, because a lot of people are not even on it for contraception.
Right.
So if they're not on it for contraception, think about getting off of it and figuring out why your cycle was irregular, or why you had that acne, or why you had painful periods. Let's get to the root of that and clean all of that up, because that's still waiting for you on the other side. So better deal with it now than later.
Exactly.
If you're on it for contraception, I would say still think about other things, because there's a lot of great ways to monitor your cycle. And there's only a few days in the month when you're ovulating where you're actually fertile. And depending on if you have changes in mucus, or, there's devices where you could just pee on it and it lets you know if you're ovulating or not. If you just track it a little bit, if a woman really doesn't want to deal with that and they're like, no, I'm on the pill, then I would just say, make sure that you're supporting methylation because it interferes with that. So you want to make, take good methylated B vitamins, take zinc. I don't recommend zinc every day, but get some zinc in a couple of days, or eat, foods, shrimp and things that have zinc in it. You need to make more of an effort to get your body methylating and detoxing properly because that's impaired. And you also want to think about taking probiotics strategically, not staying on the same one all the time, maybe switch when you run out of the bottle to go to the next one, focusing on fiber-rich foods, make sure you're going to the bathroom every day. If you're on birth control, it's just really important to take a holistic perspective and make sure that the rest of your life is that much healthier. Make sure that you're not drinking alcohol because your liver needs to metabolize the pill first. Right. And if you're giving it alcohol, it's going to be metabolizing the alcohol, and your pill might not even work at that point because it's going to be circulating. It's not going to be doing its job. That puts you at risk for unwanted pregnancies at that point. And then if you are on the birth control pill or as a perimenopausal woman and pregnancy is still a concern, if you're 50 and you don't want to have another baby, I would really consider things like a diaphragm with condoms. You're older then, and you should, in theory, be a little bit more cognizant and responsible in that area. And so I feel like that at that phase of life, it's more realistic to think about other solutions to prevent pregnancy, because this is like you're squeaking out the last of those hormones. You want every drop you can get, and the pill isn't hormones, that's endocrine disruptors. And so it's not bioidentical, it's completely synthetic, it blocks your receptors. And that's a time in our life where especially bone health, brain health, cardiovascular protection, we want all of the bioidentical hormones we can get, endogenous or exogenous. So yeah, for the late perimenopausal woman, I definitely don't recommend staying on that pill.
Yeah, that's the thing I find the hardest when I do have clients that come to me and I'm like, you're in your mid-50s. You probably don't need to be on birth control anymore. But they're so terrified and they're like, but I started it and it helped with acne or was helping with migraines. And I'm just like, but let's let your body figure out what it naturally needs to do. Let's detox that and see what's actually going on underneath the surface. And
yeah, and again, that might not be fun, but we've put it off for how long? We're going to, at some point, you got to face the music with that one.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's time to let go.
And it does become more difficult in that time because, as we lose estrogen, we're losing our ability to regulate our nervous system and our control of cortisol, and our tolerance just for BS lowers, and tolerance for all things. So, trying to address things as young as possible is easier, because the longer we wait, the more difficult it's going to be, because the less sort of mentally and physically resilient we're going to feel until we get strong again.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah. I want to go back. You've mentioned progesterone when it comes to supplementing with hormone replacement therapy. What do you feel about, what's your take on estradiol and testosterone?
Well, estradiol and testosterone share a receptor site. So first, you want to make sure that your estradiol is where you want it to be. So typically a woman, let's say if she's starting HRT in early to mid perimenopause, she'll start with progesterone just the second half of the month to make sure that she's getting enough. She's maybe still ovulating, maybe she's not ovulating every month, but we're just supporting that for as long as possible. Estrogen can be fluctuating during that time. And then when we get into late perimenopause, estrogen will be pretty low. And at that point, it's like, okay, let's add in some estrogen. So now at that point, we have estrogen and progesterone. And you want to do that for about 3 months. There can be bloating, there can be weight gain, sleep changes, mood changes. So all of that, a woman has to be prepared for, that it's not going to be magic. And for some women it is. For some women, you give them a drop and their life has changed. For other women, it's, a process where they need to kind of get bloated, and then it works its way out, though it really does.
The body has to adjust to it, right? It's all a new thing.
Yes, yeah. So you got to let that happen. And then at that point, 3 months or later, if everything's resolved, at that point, then if testosterone's low, you can add
Yep.
it in. And for some women, it's great, you know, depending on their adrenal function. There's women in, you know, their 60s, 70s who still have great testosterone because their adrenals have been well maintained the whole time. So it's
That,
not necessarily everyone needs it.
that's incredible. My adrenals have not been, they, with the mold, it just
Yeah,
started
yeah,
out.
yeah.
And so constantly need the support for sure. Yeah.
Because if you add the testosterone in too soon, it can make you gain weight
Yeah.
because
Which,
it's going to block your estrogen from getting to the receptor.
right. Which that's going to lead me into this next thing that I want to talk about is the women and the belly fat. Like that's every woman, like that's what I can't get rid of. I don't know what to do with that. Why is it happening? And everything I'm trying, it's not working. So
Yeah.
when it comes to that, we can kind of go back to the estrogen to how that affects the metabolism and why that is where that belly fat just, or where the fat just tends to settle as we get older, and what can they do about it?
So when we're younger and we have a healthy amount of estrogen, it tends to be more butt and thighs. And then as we get into later perimenopause and menopause, it then moves to the abdomen. So, and that abdominal weight is more inflammatory. So that's, you know, there's many types of estrogen, but three main types. And so your adipose tissue will produce estrone, which is an inflammatory estrogen. It's one of the reasons that our inflammatory markers go up as we lose our natural estrogen production, and we get more organ fat, more visceral fat, which of course is the dangerous kind of fat. And all of that is happening as estrogen's going down. And personally, I feel like this is our body's way of figuring out a way to make its own estrogen. Because, right, we're losing our own. It's like, oh, well, if I just have more fat, I'll make more
Right.
estrogen. Problem
Yes.
solved.
Yeah.
It's just not the right kind that we need.
Right.
And a lot of women will see that go away if they add in estradiol. I know for me personally, I had switched over last summer, I switched concentrations and I was worried it was too low, but I was still in that late perimenopause where things are changing and you got to really monitor and keep up with it. So I lowered my estradiol and boom, I got the visceral fat, I got the abdominal. I mean, it was almost overnight.
Wow.
So I needed to increase the concentration, and it was really miraculous. You know, so it's quite a struggle if you're not going to add in HRT if you've got that abdominal fat, because I mean, I'm already eating protein, lifting weights, getting sleep, doing all of the things, but that needle wasn't going to move without increasing. And I was on HRT, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly my story too. But being postmenopausal for 5 years now, it's been a rough ride. Plus, I had, on a business, I'm doing all the things, but I'm doing, like you said, eating the protein, working out, doing all the things, but nothing moved. And I was on a lower amount of estradiol, and we bumped it up within the last month, and it's just amazing. I'm like, oh, I'm finally seeing some changes. My body just did not have, and I needed more. But again, this is one thing that I want everybody to know is you can't just take HRT and expect miracles. Like you have to do all the lifestyle pieces first. And that's what you should focus first. Unless you're feeling absolutely miserable, let's get you feeling normal again. And then, but
it's all the things. It's sad. It is sadly all of the things.
Yeah.
And also as we are losing estrogen, we're losing our ability to metabolize insulin. So that's going to lead to abdominal fat. We also lose an ability to regulate cortisol. That increases abdominal fat. So there's a lot of reasons why everything wants to settle in the abdomen. And then it becomes really a vicious cycle if you let it sit there too long, because it is so inflammatory. So it's, it's not just about looks. It really is becomes its own organ and its own inflammatory cytokine producer in and of itself.
Yeah. Some people that just keep, I'm just going to wait longer. I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait. Like, you got to do it now. And just like you mentioned earlier, start earlier on this whole journey instead of waiting until you're in your 60s, because then it's going to be so much harder
Yeah, and the longer that you go without these hormones, the more downregulated your receptors become. So if you are in your 60s and haven't had a menstrual cycle in 10 years, it's not that you can't take HRT, but you're really going to have to do it slowly to wake everything up. Also, you're going to want to get a calcium score or a CIMT. You want to, an ultrasound. You want to take a look at your calcium so you don't dislodge any potential plaque that could have grown in that time. But
That's
prevention.
interesting. I've never heard that before.
Oh, so that's one of the reasons why they say it's really important to start HRT within 10 years of your last menstrual cycle, because our risk of cardiovascular disease increases so much with the loss of estradiol, and the accumulation of plaque in the arteries is pretty rapid during that time if you don't have enough estradiol. And so then if you, let's say it's 10, 15 years, you've accumulated plaque, now you add in estradiol, it can loosen that plaque.
Oh.
And then that can cause a cardiovascular event. So
Wow.
if it's been 10 years or over, you want to have some sort of, it doesn't have to be a CT. You can do the ultrasound CIMT, which I like more because it's no radiation. It gives you a lot of information. And then if that looks sketchy, okay, then maybe you want to go get a scan. But if it looks good, you're probably good.
That is interesting. Good to know. Yeah, I haven't heard that yet, so that was good to share. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's never too late. And even if you are in that category and you're like, shoot, I've got, a high calcium score, I'm not a good candidate for estrogen, I'm 65 and I haven't slept in years. Well, you can still take progesterone. I mean, it's not optimal. There is a yin and yang. You want both. But we're not looking for perfect. We're looking for a good night's sleep. So it can help.
Yeah, 'cause when you get good sleep, everything else is so much easier.
Yeah.
When you don't sleep, yeah, this makes life harder.
Yeah, not everyone is textbook cookie cutter. So you sort of have to look at each, individual very differently. And also the longer you wait, the more your cholesterol goes up. So, estradiol stimulates LDL receptors in our liver. And so that we, take LDL out of our bloodstream with those receptors. We metabolize it and get rid of it. As we lose estradiol, we lose those receptors. So LDL goes up, and then your doctor wants to put you on a statin instead of giving you estradiol.
Yeah. That's again, this education part of, if you don't like the answer you're getting, look somewhere else. At least reach out, ask somebody else, especially if you don't want to, I have so many clients that are like, I don't want to be put on these medications. I'm like, all right, then we need to do these things.
Yes.
Then you have to do something else. You can't just not go on that. We got to figure it out.
Yeah, and it's one of the clues. So, for the younger woman in your late 30s, early 40s, say, what do I look for? Cholesterol is a big one. Is your cholesterol creeping up out of nowhere and you've changed nothing? That's a good indicator. It's time to start thinking about it. Anxiety, losing sleep is a good indicator. Abdominal weight gain, lack of motivation. There are so many, or, even a couple of days of your period changing, like mine did from 28 to 25. There's a lot of small indicators that we can just brush off. But they're all clues that are letting us know that either it's time to, you can think about herbals, if it's early perimenopause, there's things you can do, with maca and that sort of thing. But then in later perimenopause, it's really HRT. And that's just an individual choice. I think there's less and less fear as years are going on about it and how protective it is. Unfortunately, there was the Women's Health Initiative study that came out in 2002 that scared a lot of people away from it. It's been reevaluated and shown that HRT really doesn't increase, it increased risk of breast cancer 1 in 1,000 with no mortality. It was just there was a breast cancer case, but it wasn't, didn't develop into a death, which isn't, a lot of people say, well, that's not comforting. I don't want it at all. Okay, it's true, but also let's consider that the women in that study were all about, in their 60s with not great health. It wasn't the cohort that we would be looking for in the first place. And it was also synthetic hormones, and it was also oral estradiol, which increases risk of cardiovascular disease a bit. So
that part It's hard for women. A doctor says, no, you can't go on after they've had breast cancer, or you can't go on HRT. And so that's just, they're like, okay. And then they're miserable. And it's like, that's not fair. That's not, you know, for them to
Yeah.
just be terrified into, I can't, because they are afraid that it's going to come back. But there are so many options, and there are new things coming out, and just,
So many different ways to do things. And just because you might not be a candidate for estradiol, maybe testosterone, progesterone, low dose vaginal estrogen. There's a lot of chatter online these days among functional experts. And I think there's some confusion about vaginal estrogen, but this is also something I love to tell women in their 30s, especially if they've had kids, to preserve their vagina, because we lose collagen and elastin and get more UTIs and all of the things. So I love to start replacing low dose estradiol younger rather than waiting. I mean, these poor women are dying in nursing homes from urosepsis when they could just be given some vaginal estrogen. It's so heartbreaking because our vaginal microbiome changes when we lose estradiol. So we don't have resilience to UTIs, and it grows into sepsis, and there's vaginal atrophy and dryness and painful intercourse. And so there's low dose estrogen that does not go systemically. So even if you can't take estrogen, you can still do that. There's also a regular concentration. This is where people get confused. So you can take a regular concentration of estrogen, put it in your vagina, and it's systemic. So it's not about the fact that it's in your vagina, it's about the concentration.
right.
So, but I do love for women to really think of their vaginal health the same way they think of taking care of the skin on their face.
Right. Yeah.
It needs some attention. You can do DHEA vaginally. There's some good serums. And that's preventatively, it's just so much easier to start younger with that one.
Right. And again, so much. It's education. If you don't like the answers you're getting, or if you're not happy, or you're not feeling good, do the research, get some answers, reach out, find some people.
Or even this, I see commercials all the time for dry eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, estrogen is lubricating. That's why you get a dry vagina and dry eyes and dry skin, and everything dries up and you get wrinkles, and you turn into a prune. Well, because we lost our estrogen. So, and not to say that some people don't need dry eye drops. There's definitely a cohort for that. But let's think about estrogen too.
Yep. Yeah. And people won't go there unless they know, right?
Yeah.
Which is great that I'm glad you're educating them and talking about this, because women they don't know.
Sorry, I feel like I'm going all over the place. Sorry, but things keep popping in my head.
But I love that. Again, the more, and some of the stuff I don't even know. So it's awesome. It's, again, like you learn so much from other people, just different stories and different ideas. And that's the thing I really want women to understand is, don't settle for no, like an answer, no, you can't do that, or whatever. Just find another way to speak to somebody else, listen to another podcast, do something to educate yourself, so that you just don't feel alone, and you just don't feel like there's nothing left to do.
You have to be your own advocate. I think it's really an opportunity for a woman to step into her own and take ownership over her life in a way that she may not have in her younger years.
Right. Yeah, 100%, for sure. This kind of leads to this as well, but I find that a lot of women, they're going through all this, they're not feeling good in their body, or their cycle's off, or they're not sleeping, and they don't know what to do, right? And for two reasons. Either it's too overwhelming because they're like, do keto, don't do keto, eat protein, don't eat protein, work out, don't work, and they're just like, oh my gosh, it's so much. So they don't know where to start, or it's too overwhelming. So for someone who is listening that feels overwhelmed and like, I just need something, where should she start? Like, what is something simple that she could start with to just focusing on her hormonal health?
I feel like it's helpful to start with what our grandparents did. Like, let's take a look at how things used to be and how people used to function, because that worked pretty well. We would sleep. We would not be on devices all night long. We would play a game or go for a walk after dinner. the way that our day was set up was very conducive to having optimal glucose and insulin control. There wasn't a lot of snacking. There weren't trendy diets. Like it was just, you ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner without snacking. That's very helpful for insulin and glucose. And we would eat a proper balanced plate, right? I mean, it was vegetables, starches, we get protein, fat. No one was afraid of one particular thing or another. I know for me, like I can't eat gluten, so that's different, but gluten wasn't the same back then as it is now. If I were back then, I probably could have eaten that gluten. And the way our meals were set up was very conducive to optimal glucose and hormonal regulation. So we would have a salad first, which would give us our fiber, and we would drink water, and it would be, more satiating. And then we would have our meal. And if you wanted dessert, then you're going to have those carbs and sugars after you've already eaten your fiber, protein, and fat.
Yep.
So I think things can seem overly complicated, but if you just put yourself back in time and look at how we used to function, it's just the basics, and it's pretty simple, and it doesn't need to be overly thought out.
Right. It doesn't need to be overwhelming.
No.
Just think simple, and for most people too, just do something, start something, shift something instead of just not doing anything.
Yeah, and it's all of the little things that add up. I know if I'm sitting at my desk I'll look it up, oh my gosh, I've been here for 2 hours. I'll go out and go for a walk. It doesn't have to be a huge hour commitment. You can just 10 minutes. If you've got a treadmill, and for me, it's too hot outside, I'll hop on my treadmill for 10 minutes and just sort of zone out, and I give my brain a break and I get my legs moving. Taking walks after meals is great. That's one of the reasons that dogs, people with dogs tend to have healthier lives, because they have to go out for
yeah.
Just little sort of, workout snacks here and there. Because if you work out for an hour in the morning and sit the rest of the day, you're still sedentary.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. That's people like, well, I worked out already. I'm like, but that's not movement. That's just 1 hour of all this hours in your day. You need to do something different.
Yeah, because a lot of it is just, our inability to deal with glucose and insulin. And that's, just having this sedentary lifestyle. And then of course, with the loss of estrogen. So it's just, it's one of the things I recommend for women in early, mid, late perimenopause would be a glucose monitor, not all the time, but just once every couple months or twice a year, whatever works for you. But it's a good idea to just try it, click it on. It doesn't hurt. People think it's a needle. It's a little filament. The noise, it's a click. So you hear the click, but you don't feel anything. It doesn't actually hurt. And you wear it for 2 weeks and you can see how you're responding. It was one of the reasons that I decided to take HRT, along with the other things. My cycle shortened, my cholesterol was increasing. And also my ability to regulate glucose was like off the charts. I would eat a meal exactly the way I explained, like we used to. I'd have the salad and the protein. And if I wanted to have a cookie or anything after, my glucose would go crazy. And it made no sense because I had, you do the apple cider vinegar, you do all the things. And I'm walking up and down the hill and trying to get it down. I said, this is nuts. It's time for estrogen.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Huh. I have not done the glucose monitor. I would love to do it, but honestly, right now I feel like my body responds pretty well just because I've been on
Probably does.
estrogen. I can tell a difference. I don't eat and like I'm hungry right away, or I have sugar. I just need more sugar and more. It's like I'm satisfied. I'm happy. It feels good. My body feels good. So
yeah, and that's a great way to judge it too. Do you feel grounded? Do you feel satiated after you eat? Like if all of those things feel balanced, then you probably don't need it. But a lot of people don't feel that way. Yeah, they feel off.
Yeah. Okay. I want to close this by talking about this upcoming book of yours that you have coming out called Sexy Bones.
Yes.
What is that about? Like, if you want to share a little bit more, and like, what made you want to write a book?
I was diagnosed. I mean, technically osteopenia is not a diagnosis, but I was told I had osteopenia. I had gotten a DEXA scan. Was it about 4 years ago now. And yeah, I had low bone density. So it wasn't quite osteoporosis. It's kind of like being pre-diabetic and diabetic. If you are showing osteopenia in your 40s, you better, if you're not doing anything about it, there's a good chance you're going to end up with osteoporosis and a hip fracture. And a third of women die within the first year of having a hip fracture. So it was a whole area that I just really had never thought about. And once my eyes were opened, I was like, gee, I mean, everyone needs to understand this, and we need to be talking to our daughters when they're teenagers about this. So the book really covers all the stages in life and the importance of how we feed our babies and our children, because we're, growing the most bone before 18 and definitely before the age of 30. And then we can lose 10% of our bone density in late perimenopause alone. So it's just crazy how quickly it happens, and it's completely manageable and reversible for a lot of people. I mean, now, I'm still in the range of osteopenia, but like right at the border. I mean, my bone density has improved a tremendous amount. I was not prioritizing protein. I was doing too much intermittent fasting. I was weight training, but I wasn't increasing my weight every time. I was kind of doing the same sets and reps every time. So I got a trainer who really pushes me. And again, that's an expense. You don't have to have a trainer every time you work out. You can work with one once or twice and get into your own groove. But we have our teenagers having a cup of coffee and getting a muffin or a bagel and not loading any weights, and they're running on the treadmills because they're focused on being skinny and not strong. So at every stage in our life, there's a lesson to be learned about our bone health. When we're growing a baby and nursing them, and that depletes us a tremendous amount. So I just want women at all ages to be aware of how their stress levels, their cortisol depletes their bones of calcium. There's so many things involved in bone health, and it is one of the leading causes of death. So, for women later in life, and it's completely preventable with knowledge. And DEXA scans aren't covered under insurance till we're 65. So most women aren't even going to think of it until they're 65 and their doctor says, get a DEXA, when they should have said it when they were in their 30s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that. So that all comes, huge. That's again, the other thing that I think women don't think about is I need to be strong as I get older. Not only do you want to feel better, but you need to be strong, and your bones need to be strong, because for that reason, I've heard so many stories of women falling down and getting hurt, and then they don't ever get better. They don't ever heal. They don't ever get back to themselves because their body just wasn't healthy. It wasn't strong.
Yeah, and it just increases so quickly in menopause and perimenopause. I mean, 1 out of 2 women will have a fragility fracture above the age of 50. Now, it may not be a hip fracture, but I feel like we all know women who twist their ankle gently and break it, or fall and catch themselves and break their wrist.
Yep.
And those are the women that are headed for the hip fracture that leads to pneumonia, that leads to,
Yeah, I love that. Everything that you're talking about in this book is everything that I've learned in the past 5 years and changed. Because I used to do more cardio-based workouts and wasn't eating enough protein, and now it's like, okay, lift the heavy weights so that I get strong and make sure I'm eating protein and all the things. So I love that. That's great. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It was a very, very eye-opening, and most of my clients then, once I learned about that with myself, I sent everyone to get DEXA, and most of them were in the osteopenia range, because we were all like, 80s and 90s people, where that was just cardio, thin.
Yep, 100%. Oh, that's awesome. When is the book coming out, and where will people be able to find it?
It should be this time next year, and anywhere books are sold.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome. That's great. I'll definitely be checking that one out and sharing it with everyone. For sure. This has been awesome. This has been great. I love all the directions we went in, because again, there's so much you can talk about. We could probably talk for hours, but it's fun to just kind of talk about whatever. I do appreciate your time. So let's just close out with sharing. Where can women find more about you? Reach out if they have any questions about anything you had to talk about.
I'm my website, Strong Choices. I'm Strong Choices 1 on Instagram. I'm pretty active there with educational content. And yeah, they can find me there. And thank you so much for having me. It was really great to talk to you.
Yes, this has been so awesome. Thanks again to our listeners for tuning in. And thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's episode hit home, make sure to subscribe to the show and share it with a friend who needs it too. And if you're ready for more support, come hang out with us in the Fit Chicks and Hormones community. The link is in the show notes. And until next time, keep showing up for yourself. You deserve it.